A single mother saved a millionaire buried alive in the woods. But what he whispered made them both cry. The forest breathed in slow silence as twilight descended, casting a soft amber glow through the trees. Angela, a single mother in her early 30s, walked beside her son Nico, who clutched her hand tightly. Their boots crunched over fallen leaves, the air thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. These after-school walks were their quiet ritual, a way to escape the noise of the world. Nico darted ahead, energized after a long day, his backpack bouncing with every step. "Mama, look!" he called, pointing to a twisted root that arched above the ground like a sleeping dragon. He reached it before she could respond and tripped. He hit the ground with a sharp cry. Angela rushed to him. "Are you okay, baby?" Before he could answer, a sound pierced the stillness. A voice, barely more than a whisper, muffled and desperate. "Water, please." Angela froze. She looked around. No one, nothing. Just the rustling leaves and Nico's wide, frightened eyes. "You heard that too?" she asked, and he nodded. She knelt, brushing aside leaves and dirt where Nico had fallen. Her fingers hit something cold, metal. A vent, small and rusted, hidden beneath the roots. "Hello?" she called. No answer, then a faint groan. Angela's instincts kicked in. She grabbed the small water bottle from her pack, unscrewed the cap, and poured a stream through the grate. From below came the sound of someone drinking, gasping between gulps. "We'll get you out," she said. With no tools but her hands, she began digging. Her nails cracked, her palms scraped raw. Nico stood close, silent, handing her a stick to help. Bit by bit, the earth gave way, revealing a corroded hatch. Angela wedged her fingers beneath it and pulled with all her strength. It creaked. Then, with a final wrench, it swung open. A rush of warm, fetid air escaped. She coughed, blinking back tears as she peered inside. A man lay there, barely conscious, his clothes torn, his skin pale and streaked with blood and mud. He tried to move, but collapsed back with a grunt. Angela reached down. "Give me your hand," she said. "Come on, I've got you." He barely managed to raise his arm, but she took it, braced herself, and pulled him upward with everything she had. He emerged from the hole like a ghost reborn, breathing, but barely. Angela lowered him to the ground. His lips moved. She leaned closer, catching the rasp of his breath. "I used to have a family," he said, "but the one I trusted most buried me alive." His head rolled to the side as unconsciousness claimed him. Angela pressed her fingers to his neck. He was alive, but fading. She wrapped him in Nico's rain poncho and pulled her phone from her pocket. No signal. She looked at Nico. "We're taking him home." The boy nodded without hesitation. Angela knew this moment had changed everything. She didn't know who the man was, but he had whispered the kind of pain only truth could carry, and whatever had brought him here, buried under roots and silence, was far from over. The shed behind Angela's modest cottage creaked as the wind rustled the trees overhead. It was the only structure far enough from the road and neighbors to offer real privacy. She had not used it in years. Once it had held tools, paint cans, a bicycle Nico had outgrown. Now it held something else entirely, a man the world believed gone, wrapped in old quilts, lying pale and broken on a makeshift cot. Angela stood in the doorway, her breath catching in the cool night air. She glanced back toward the house where Nico lay asleep, a soft nightlight glowing in his room. Before sneaking out, she had kissed his forehead and whispered, "Mama's just checking the garden." He had rolled over, still dreaming. Inside the shed, she set down the small lantern she carried. Its golden light cast long shadows across the wooden walls, revealing shelves lined with forgotten jars and gardening tools. Her eyes landed on the man, Leo, she had decided to call him, if only to give him a name that felt real in the silence. His face was flushed, drenched in sweat. He trembled beneath the layers she had wrapped around him, and when he stirred, his voice cracked with fever. "Clemens? Verena? Betrayal." The name slipped from his lips like ghosts escaping a grave. Angela knelt beside him. She touched his wrist. His pulse was fast, erratic, fever dreams. She knew the signs. Her hands moved automatically, gathering cloths, brewing herbal mixtures. From a wooden box she had kept hidden beneath her sink, she pulled dried leaves, yarrow for infection, willow bark for pain, elderflower to bring down the fever. She boiled water on the portable stove and stirred the mixture, just as she had done for Thomas, her husband, in the final months of his life. The memory hurt, but the motion comforted her. When the tea had cooled, she spooned a few drops to Leo's lips. He flinched at first, then drank greedily, groaning as he swallowed. "Easy," she said softly. "Not too fast." He murmured something again, but this time she could not understand. "I don't know who Clemens is," she whispered, brushing the damp hair from his forehead. "But you're safe now." Leo's hands twitched, dirt still caked beneath his fingernails. His face was sunken, his cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. Around his wrists, red abrasions marked where restraints had once been. Angela had seen enough to know. This man had been imprisoned, not injured by chance. But who had done this to him, and why? Later that night she returned with warm soup. She had kept it simple: broth, carrots, a few noodles. He was still too weak to feed himself, so she sat beside him and helped him sip from a spoon. He said nothing, but his eyes opened, clearer now. They met hers, silent, filled with something like disbelief, gratitude, perhaps, but also wariness. Angela didn't press. "You don't have to talk," she said. "Just get strong. That's all that matters." Outside, the wind picked up. A branch tapped against the shed window like a warning. She looked around, suddenly aware of the weight of what she had done. She had taken in a stranger, hidden him, lied to her son. She thought of the names he had whispered. Clemens, Verena. Were they his family, friends, enemies? She returned to the house, checked on Nico, then slipped back into the shed. She stayed most of the night, curled in a chair, dozing with one eye open. At one point Leo stirred again, his voice cracking as he whispered, "They think I'm dead." Angela looked at him, startled. "Who?" His eyes fluttered open just long enough to meet hers. "The ones I trusted." Then he drifted back to sleep. She sat in silence after that, the weight of his words sinking into her bones. This was no accident, no wilderness mishap. Someone had wanted this man to vanish. Someone had gone to great lengths to bury the truth. Angela knew then she hadn't just saved a life. She had unearthed a secret someone was willing to kill to keep buried. Under the soft yellow glow of the oil lamp in the shed, Leo stirred for the first time in an hour. Angela, who had just finished replacing the damp, warm compress on his bruised forehead, froze in place, her breath catching in her chest. His lips, dry and cracked, parted slightly. "Water," he rasped, the word barely audible but unmistakably conscious. She moved without hesitation, slipping her arm around his back and carefully helping him to sit up. His body was weak, trembling with effort, but he didn't resist. Angela held a chipped ceramic cup to his lips and tilted it gently. He sipped slowly, coughed, then took another drink. The water seemed to bring a flicker of clarity to his eyes. They searched the space around him, unfocused at first, until they settled on her face. "You're safe," Angela said softly. "You're with me now. I found you in the woods. You were buried, you remember?" Leo blinked slowly, the words taking a moment to reach him. His gaze was still fogged with pain, but he nodded, barely more than a tremor in his neck. I should be dead," he whispered. Angela swallowed hard. "Tell me what happened, only if you can." Leo leaned back against the pile of old blankets she had arranged behind him. His breathing was shallow, his voice hoarse and uneven, but his memories were sharp, cutting through the haze like broken glass. "I was a CEO," he began. "Healthcare innovations. We built clinics in rural areas, subsidized medicine, partnered with nonprofits. I thought we were doing something good, something real." Angela listened, unmoving, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "My wife Verena was everything I thought I wanted. Elegant, passionate, strategic. And my best friend Clemens, he was the CFO. I trusted him like a brother. He handled the numbers, the accounts. We had nothing to hide. Or so I believed. He paused, the corners of his mouth twitching, with something between grief and disbelief. Whole night, I came home early from a board meeting. The house was quiet. I went upstairs and I heard them. Laughter. Whispers. My wife and Clemens. Together. Intimate. I didn't want to believe it, but when I walked in, there was nothing left to doubt. Angela's heart clenched. She could see the betrayal still raw in his eyes. They didn't deny it. In fact, they admitted everything. They had been planning this for months. Verena wanted full control of the estate. Clemens wanted the company. They had already diverted funds, millions into offshore accounts, faked contracts, forged signatures. All under my nose. Leo closed his eyes. His hands trembled. I threatened to expose them. I told them I'd go to the police, the board. I was furious, but Clemens... He panicked. There was a poker by the fireplace. He grabbed it. Leo's fingers rose to the side of his head, touching the bruised skin beneath his hairline. He swung. I didn't even feel it, just a flash. Then darkness. Angela let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. When I came to, I was underground. A metal box, small, no light. My hands were bound. There was a vent pipe, just enough air. They thought I was dead. They buried me alive. His voice cracked and he turned his face away, as if the shame was his to carry. They staged everything, a retreat, a sabbatical. Verena told the press I needed time, that I'd gone off-grid to write a memoir. Everyone believed her. Why wouldn't they? Angela reached for his hand. It was cold, but when her fingers closed around his, he didn't pull away. But it wasn't just the betrayal, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It was what I didn't get to say. He turned to her, his eyes glistening. I have a son, Jonathan. He's 12. That night, I promised him I'd be home for dinner. We were going to build a model rocket. I never came home. I didn't get to tell him. Leo's voice cracked. A tear slipped down his cheek. I didn't get to tell him I love him. Angela squeezed his hand, unable to speak. That thought, it was the only thing that kept me alive, he whispered. In the dark, tied, bleeding, I thought of his face, his laugh. I kept whispering his name, praying he wouldn't forget me. Leo turned his eyes to the lamp, its flickering flame reflected in the moisture clinging to his lashes. And then I heard you, he said. You heard me? Angela nodded, her own eyes now wet with tears. I did, and I'm not leaving you. In that dim shed, surrounded by old tools and the scent of rain-soaked earth, a man who had been buried by betrayal began to rise again, lifted not just by the hands that found him, but by the love he had carried through the dark. Under the soft light of the dining room, the air between Angela and Leo had changed. Since the night he told her his story, the invisible wall she had kept up began to fade. She no longer avoided the shed, no longer flinched at the haunted look in his eyes. Instead, she brought fresh soup every evening, extra blankets, clean clothes. Her kindness no longer felt like obligation, it felt like connection. One afternoon, while Angela folded laundry in the living room, Nico rushed in from the backyard, a worried look on his face. Mama, my fire truck's wheel came off again. Angela opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Leo appeared in the doorway behind Nico, his steps careful but sure. He knelt and examined the toy. Do you mind if I take a look? Leo asked gently. Nico looked at his mother. Angela nodded. With careful hands, Leo turned the toy over, adjusted the axle, and with the help of an old screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, he clicked the wheel back into place. Nico beamed. Thanks, Uncle Leo, he chirped before running off. Angela stood frozen for a moment. Uncle Leo? It came out so naturally. That night, after putting Nico to bed, Angela went to the kitchen to make tea. When she returned to the living room, she paused in the hallway. On the sewing table, she saw Nico's old jacket, torn at the shoulder, one she had meant to throw away. The rip was gone. Someone had mended it. The stitches were clean, even, almost invisible. She turned slowly. Leo was sitting by the window, a mug of tea in his hands. "You sewed his jacket," she said softly. Leo looked up. "I used to sew a lot when I was young. My mother taught me." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I wanted him to have it. I figured some things can still be fixed." Angela walked over and sat beside him. Silence passed comfortably between them before she finally said, "He likes you, you know." Leo looked down into his tea. "He reminds me of my son, not in how he looks, but the way he talks when he's excited, the way he trusts." Dinner that evening was simple: chicken stew and bread, Nico giggling through stories about school, Leo listening attentively, even smiling. Angela watched them, her heart aching in a way she had not felt in years. After Nico went to bed, she stayed at the table with Leo. The dishes lay untouched. "Thank you," she said. Leo glanced up. "For what?" "For being here, for trying, for caring." Leo's voice dropped. "You were the only one who cared for me." Angela hesitated, then spoke quietly. "My husband, he had cancer. It happened so fast, 6 months from the first symptom to the last breath. I cared for him every day, washed him, fed him, held his hand when the pain got too bad." Leo looked at her, but said nothing. "I watched the person I loved fade away," Angela continued, "but he never had to face the end alone, and I promised myself no one else should either." Her eyes glistened. "I know what it feels like to lose someone, and I know what it means to be there when it matters most. That's why I didn't leave you in that hole, Leo. That's why I stayed." Leo reached across the table, his hand brushing hers, not as a man reaching for romance, but as a man reaching for understanding. "I would have died in that hole," he said. "But I didn't. Because you listened." Angela smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "And because you wanted to live." In that quiet space, between shared losses and unspoken hopes, something began to bloom, not love yet, but something just as rare. The realization that two broken hearts could still beat in rhythm. Leo's steps were steadier now. Weeks had passed since Angela had pulled him from that grave, and each day his body remembered what it meant to live. But more than that, his mind had begun to sharpen again. The shed, once a place of recovery, now resembled a command center. Angela had brought in an old corkboard where Leo pinned papers, receipts, sketches of timelines. On the desk, his weathered personal notebook lay open, its pages filled with scribbles, names, passwords he had forced himself to remember. Some were blurred by the sweat of fevered nights, but they were still legible, still useful. He spent hours tracing his last days. The gala where he first noticed Clemens whispering to Verena, the business trip they insisted he take alone, the sudden medical retreat they gifted him. He recalled fragments of the final argument, Verena's eyes, cold and strange, and Clemens shouting something about Leo never understanding loyalty, and then the blow. Angela, watching from the corner, knew when to offer help and when to step back. Today she leaned over his shoulder as Leo reviewed printouts of old financial documents he had managed to access with a surviving account password. "These are transfers I never approved," Leo murmured. "Shell companies, holdings I never even authorized." Angela nodded. "There's someone I can contact. You mentioned Daniel Heller. Used to run private accounts at Nordwest Bank." Leo's eyes lit up. "Yes, we trusted him. I found him on LinkedIn last night. I sent a message from a burner profile. If he answers, we'll know if he's still on your side." Hours later, they had confirmation. Daniel didn't ask many questions. "Leo," he said softly through a scrambled VoIP call, "if this is truly you, tell me the name of the dog you rescued from the rooftop flood in 2012. "Crisco," Leo replied without hesitation. "You said he looked like a wet loaf of bread." There was silence, then a tremble in Daniel's voice. "My God, they said you died." Leo told him everything, briefly, carefully. No drama, just facts. Daniel, shaken but loyal, agreed to help.